I'm here with Reverend Dr. Georgia A. Hill and Diane Proctor Reeder, two authors from Detroit, Michigan, on a mission to combine their faith, their Blackness, and their femaleness to tell a unique story that continues those three aspects of their lives. Dr. Georgia A. Hill and Diane Proctor Reeder, let me ask you, how did you guys come up with A Cloud of Women, the powerful connection between Black women and women of the Bible?
Sure. Well, that's what we call our origin story. And Ryan, thank you so much for having us on your YouTube channel. We
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I actually wrote a play some years ago called A Cloud of Women. And it was my shorthand for it is it's a biblical for color girls. So it's kind of like for color girls, but it's with biblical characters. So the women from Sarah to Eve to Mary, the mother of Jesus, just come and tell their stories in monologue form. We set it to music and dance. And actually, Georgia has been in two of my plays, including that one. And so I started editing for Our Daily Bread Publishing some years ago after the play had run quite a few places throughout the Midwest. And the managing editor or head of their Our Daily Bread's African American imprint called Voices, her name is Joyce Dinkins. And I came to her by way of my good friend Matthew Parker, who is quite a figure in the evangelical community in the area of racial reconciliation and equity. She brought me in through him to do editing for that African American imprint. I mentioned the play to her and she invited me to do a book proposal. And as I thought about not necessarily going it alone on that book, I couldn't think of anyone better than my good friend, Reverend Georgia Hill, who was my associate pastor at Plymouth United Church of Christ, where I'm now a member, and since has started her own church, Life Church Riverside, Detroit. But she's also an African American scholar, an attorney, an amazing preacher, and an amazing writer. And so I just thought she was the perfect person to bring in as a co-author. And what we decided to do is compare these amazing biblical women with similarly amazing Black women of faith in history, and to show their parallels and to show their power. I love your introduction that says we mix our faith with our ethnicity, with our femaleness. I really like that description because I feel that's spot on in terms of what we were trying to do. But to showcase amazing women and uplift women who have been so denigrated over the centuries, and uplift in particular Black women who have been the most denigrated of all over the centuries.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And you've said in past interviews that women, historically, and you point to the example of Eve, have often been blamed in society. Can you talk about that and how that influenced the book?
Go ahead, Georgia. I'll let you do that.
Well, I think that what has happened with the biblical stories is they've been interpreted through the lens of gender bias. Right. And so the characters are limited and restricted in those ways because people are looking at them through a self-serving posture. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, then the woman Eve becomes she is blamed for humanity's downfall. And we do this, don't we? We look for the person to blame. What happens, of course, is that you turn Eve into a two-dimensional figure. We miss the richness of her character, and we miss the accuracy of the story, which says that when she took the piece of fruit, we don't know what kind of fruit it was. In my story, it's a mango, right? But when she took the fruit, her husband was standing right there with her. Adam was right there with her. So I think that what Diane did so beautifully in the play was sort of release the women from the sort of, not just the strictures of the scripture, but from a lens right? That people would use a patriarchal, gender biased lens, release them from that lens and allow the women to just talk and come alive. And then what we thought would be so powerful was to look at modern day and historical women, Black women, who are awesome because of their faith.
Yeah.
And personally, I just want to say that I'm hoping that as women read the book, they'll be inspired to see their own lives in those pages and to realize that they too, because of their faith, can do great things. Secondly, I've been hoping that people will recognize that some of the greatness that we see in some of the wonderful Black women, and this of course applies to brown women, why it is not just Black women that have great faith, right? But that when people would understand that some of what we see in the world, women achieving great things, many of those women are women of faith.
Yeah.
But we just don't tell that story. We tell the story about what they did that was great, but we don't tell the story that they sang in the choir and they taught Bible study and that they were women of faith and that they prayed late in the midnight hour over their children and used their faith to get money to start schools and businesses and had dreams that God had given them.
Yeah, Fannie Lou Hamer, who we have in the book, her whole life was based on a scripture in the book of Micah. What does God require but to do justice and love mercy and walk humbly with your God? And her whole life of fighting for justice for our people was based in that scripture. That became her kind of life purpose verse. So there's a million stories like that, and we try to tell some of them in the book.
Most definitely. And, one thought comparison of Vice President Kamala Harris, potentially one of the first presidents, you say like, she's the genesis, the prototype of so many magnificent Black women first, from pilot Bessie Smith. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So our very first chapter is about Eve. Eve was the first woman. And so in turn, we talk about Black women first, as you indicate, Bessie Smith, Kamala Harris. Just as an aside, we just recently did a promotion where we sent the book to several Black bookstores around the country, and we are encouraging readers to buy and support our African American bookstores because, as you know, in this era of ebooks and multi-conglomerate kind of businesses, they're always struggling. And so for them to even keep their doors open is an achievement. Where we sent the book out and offered to donate 10% of our royalties from those sales to the Harris campaign, because we are that excited about her candidacy. But to get back to the book, that these Black women firsts, just like Eve, are misunderstood and denigrated, and, as Georgia said, pigeonholed into a certain role. So to talk about them in analogous to Eve, we thought would be really important to start the book out with.
That's really cool. And Michigan is like one of those battleground states. Former President Trump recently visited Michigan and he made some not so nice remarks about Detroit, saying that if Vice President Harris wins the presidency, that the nation will be like Detroit. Do you guys feel like that was an insulting remark, being from Detroit?
Incredibly offended by most of the things that the former president says. Yes. Georgia.
I think that, we just need to take our conversation to a higher level, right? And stop denigrating people and groups of people and communities of people. And somebody, I don't remember who it was, some Detroiter said, well, great, we hope the country is like Detroit because we have been involved in this ongoing renaissance, growing, more businesses, development in the neighborhoods, hosting major events like the NFL draft. I mean, let's get real. Sure, we hope that all the cities, there are lots of cities that have never hosted a draft, so we hope that they will be able to host the draft as well. But I think what we want to do is to have a higher level of conversation and to talk about how we can come together as a nation
Right.
and how we can improve the quality of life for people. And that's what I think is exciting about this book. The book required quite a bit of research, as you might imagine, because we had to study some of these women. And I tell you, some of the stories, some of the things I've learned just in studying the material to come up with the book, just really fascinating stories of women who put nickels and dimes together. I mean, Mary McLeod Bethune starts Bethune-Cookman, what now is Bethune-Cookman University, literally by purchasing things from a dump.
Wow.
And by selling dinners and cakes and getting small amounts of money. And she literally started the school on a piece of property that was basically just all but refuse. And when she took one of her investors there, she said, "Don't you see it? Don't you see? I see the school here." And he's looking around this abandoned field filled with junk and garbage. And so the fact that these women had that kind of vision, and that they were inspired to start churches and businesses and gather other women whose sons had been murdered by the police and turn those gatherings into movements. I mean, this is what we really want to focus on, and to focus on the fact that by faith, right? We've come this far by faith. We do these things by faith. And just an encouragement to people, men, women, children, to people, just to know that there are things you can do by your faith. And let me just say this as well. It was really a pleasure to work with Diane, because Diane is an experienced author. And I think that I might say to those who are out there who are thinking about doing a book, find somebody who's already done it and work with them. What a wonderful experience. I'm going to tell you honestly, Ryan, at one point, I was like, "Diane, I need some help. Please help me with this section I'm trying to get together." And she was able to do it because she has that kind of experience. She's spent many late nights trying to get her books together. And that really helped me. And so I think that for those of you out there who want to write a book, you've got a book in mind. Find somebody who's done it and see if you can work together. It's a good experience. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we had a great time together.
I feel like, we're seeing like a lot more like, collaborations with co-authors of books, recently. Do you feel that writing a book, like, with your partner, like, that's an easier process than doing it alone?
It depends on the partners.
Right. That's what I would imagine. What do you think, is important to look for in a partner like you if you decide to co-author a book with them?
Like-mindedness in your foundational philosophy of not how you think, but what you believe. Not lockstep in agreement with everything, because that tension makes for great content, because you have to really think and wrestle with the concepts together. And that's a great process. But if you are not, and I'll just use a biblical term, equally yoked, in that you don't have foundational beliefs that are similar or compatible, that would make it difficult. But other than that, I think that's real important. The other thing that's really important is to leave your egos at the door, so that nobody thinks they're more important than the other. This was a truly collaborative effort with Georgia. And I would dare to say that neither of us felt that we ourselves were more instrumental in the process than the other.
No, definitely not. No, it was teamwork, and that it's kind of trite, but it does make the dream work when you can come together as teams. So definitely.
Most definitely. Teamwork is so important. Teamwork makes the dream work. And I think that in the church, there's no more hotly debated issue today than women serving as pastors. And a lot of people like, might see that as an issue of men versus women. There are women who believe women should not serve as pastors, and that the Bible, places restrictions on the ministry of women. And then there's men who believe women can serve as pastors and that there are no restrictions on women in ministry. But this isn't a matter of chauvinism or discrimination. It's an issue of biblical interpretation. I obviously know how you guys feel about it, but what do you think about that being such a contentious issue in the church today?
I would say, and then I'm gonna really let Reverend Georgia speak to this because she is a woman pastor, very powerful in her own right. But I think one of the reasons I even wrote the play in the first place was to show the leadership of women in the Bible and to debunk the myth that women were sort of subservient homemakers and didn't play any other role. One of the best examples, of course, is the example of the warrior and judge Deborah, who was a leader. They called her a mother in Israel, and she led the entire nation. So it cannot be that women are not meant by God to lead. That very story gives the lie to that idea. And I'm gonna let Reverend Georgia take it from there.
And she led together the army, right, with her commander, right? And so that was the beautiful imagery of it as well, is that he said, well, look, we need for you to go with us into battle. And she said, okay, I'm coming. And so this is a real blessing, I think, as a story that we can find hope in. But I think that personally, I have experienced both. I've experienced gender discrimination. I've experienced that. I've also experienced a lot of support and a lot of encouragement from men. And so I've experienced both extremes, if you will. And, my feeling has always been that I want women to have equal access to the pulpit. I want them to be recognized for their power in ministry. But I've been in situations where people said, you're going to preach from the floor, and Reverend Hill, you're going to be over here. And, and you know what? My feeling is there are so many people out there that need hope and help, that there are women who will preach from the bedside. They will pray with you. They will intercede on your behalf. They will prophesy. They will do what needs to be done. And if the system doesn't make room for them, they will make room. They will make room. They will push and they will press and they will do what they have to do. And I believe that you can't really stop that. And I feel in this day and time, one thing that kind of concerns me is it seems like there are groups of people, male and female, who are so afraid of women who are influential and have authority that they're trying to turn us away or turn us back to an older mindset and an older way of doing things, where women did not lead organizations, women did not fly planes, women did not. And it's odd to me, because we live in a time where we need more solutions. We need better business operation. We need more children fed. We need more people rescued from human trafficking. We need better educational systems. We need so much.
Right.
And I don't understand this idea of really reducing our forces, because some of the people are female. It mystifies me. But let me just say that women have been doing it, from the kitchen, from the boardroom, from whatever room, the cockpit of the plane. I mean, people have been doing it. Women have been doing it, and they will continue to do so. That's just the time that we live in. There's too much that needs to be done. And let us celebrate the mothers, the homemakers, the people who are sacrificing to make sure that their children are homeschooled, who are making sure that their children get the kind of attention that they feel, that they deem necessary. And so they're not working. Why can't we celebrate all of that? Why must we cherry pick I believe that all of it is valuable and rich and wonderful.
And in fact, we actually have one of the stories compares three powerful African American women to Mary, the mother of Jesus. I found an amazing book called Three Mothers, which lays out the biographies of the mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. They were all women of faith. They were believers in Jesus Christ, and they conveyed that faith to their three sons. Now, one of their sons, of course, went into Christian ministry. One went into the Nation of Islam, and the other was one who said he really did not believe in the God that he was taught about. However, in all of their writings, God's message of justice and of love and of reconciliation seeps through, even despite some of their pronouncements against the very faith that their mothers taught them. And so that to me was a very powerful story. And these were all women who really concentrated on being mothers in the home, in addition to their activism in the community. So that's a great point.
Most definitely. And you brought up like, Malcolm X. And I think like, his story is so, because I don't think a lot of people realize like, that his father was a minister, but he was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. And like, it really affected his mother deeply. Obviously, like, she had mental health issues because of that situation, dealing with that trauma. And it obviously like, led to his life, and he was able to find his path, like, with Islam. You all, like, I feel are doing such an important work. And I think like, this is a really important story. A Cloud of Women is published by Our Daily Bread Publishing. The Harris Campaign pledge does not reflect the views of the publisher. I know a lot of evangelicals support Trump. Some people will point to the abortion issue, but I feel like, as Christians that we have to, he doesn't, I feel like, reflect Christian values, because like, someone who lies and makes such xenophobic remarks all the time. What would you say to evangelicals, like, who are supporting Trump as he kind of like tries to portray himself as a believer of God? I can't judge like necessarily his belief, but like some of his actions don't demonstrate like, someone who's displaying Christian values.
Mm-hmm. And this isn't an original thought at all, but I believe in focusing on the things that Jesus focused on. Jesus saved his most ardent ire and anger for religious leaders and politicians.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about how they oppress the poor. He talked about how they lay burdens on everyday people that they themselves do not adhere to. He talked about hypocrisy. To me, this ex-president exemplifies all the things that Jesus directed his anger towards. So I'm going to kind of side with Jesus in this and say that Trump certainly does not reflect any of the values that he taught in his 3 years on the earth.
Yeah, and I would say that when people get into that ballot box, they need to really search their hearts. And if they are Christians, if they're following Christ, they need to think about, what did Jesus do? And what did Jesus say? And when you evaluate, and when it comes time for you to make the vote, you need to figure out, what is it that Jesus said and what did Jesus do? To whom did Jesus minister? Around whom did he minister? And what did he say to the various players? What did he say to the poor? What did he say to the children, to the women? What did he say to the wealthy?
Yes.
I mean, if you think about what he did, with whom did he interact? He was with the sick, the lepers, the unclean. So we really have to think about that. And if you're going to be a follower of Christ in your conduct and in the things that you do, to me, that's what I've been telling our congregation. I've been saying, first of all, I believe this. I personally believe everybody ought to vote. That's my personal opinion. Everybody ought to vote. You ought to vote. I don't care whether you're the blue, red, green, purple, yellow party. You need to vote. And because people like Fannie Lou Hamer, beaten to within an inch of her life, the woman could have died on that jail cell floor. She was beaten so bad. She had lifelong injuries resulting from that beating. And she was beat. Why? Because she was registering voters. And the only reason she probably stayed alive that night was because she and another lady who was sopping up the blood off her body sang all night long. When we think about those kind of sacrifices, everybody needs to vote. But number two, when you need to think about what did, we had that thing a few years ago. What was it? What would Jesus do? No, not what did Jesus do? What did he do? And then vote. That's what I'm telling my congregation. Think about what did Jesus do? Then vote. Then you put your little mark wherever you think it ought to go. But that's what you need to think about, what he did and the life he led, because that's what we are supposed to be conformed to his image.
Most definitely. We're running out of time. Reverend Dr. Georgia A. Hill and Diane Proctor Reader, I really enjoyed having you. Your book, A Cloud of Women, The Powerful Connection Between Black Women and Women of the Bible. Where can people purchase it?
Sure. So we have a website. It is the name of our book, www.acloudofwomen.com, and it gives you links to purchase the book from bookstores as well as Amazon.com. We also have an Instagram page. It is @ A Cloud of Women book. That will also point you to the purchases. But again, we're encouraging people to buy from Black bookstores all over the country.
Yes.
We don't mind